who you are is remembering that you are the divine, right? You are you're your soul, you're your essence, you are infinite. And that, I think, is the most important part. And, you know, we've talked sometimes about like common things that people, you know, mess up during manifestation, right? I think this is the thing that people skip, that actually you cannot skip because the whole process requires you to actually know that you are unlimited, right? And so we have to connect to that unlimited self. And that is the first step to being a conscious creator of your reality and to manifesting.
That cupcake analogy so much, and it's so accurate because we can try to like do the vision board and like the full moon thing and like all these things, and it's really fun, and it is also very healing. And those deeper wounds, those patterns that are happening, if they're not addressed, then we can't really manifest. And I love how you teach all of it. You know, you're like, let's go into the shadows and let's do all the fun rituals. And you're like the ritual master. Like, you're like, we're like walking on a beach. You're like, let's use the seaweed to like throw away what's no longer serving us. I'm like, yes. And we have so many of them in Rose Gold Goddesses from you. But it was so interesting because I was recently listening to the audiobook of The Vortex by Esther Hicks, Abraham Hicks. And in it, you know, it's all questions. And someone asked, they were like, what if I keep attracting a negative relationship? Like all of my relationships continue to be toxic and negative. What do you suggest I do? And their response was, only focus on what you want in a relationship and just don't think about anything that went wrong in that relationship before, because then you're going to bring that into the next relationship. So just anything that you didn't like about it, just stop giving it any attention or any energy and only think about what you want in a relationship. And to me, that didn't really feel like a totally healed perspective, because it's not like, okay, I'm not going to think of the fact that we fought all the time or like we cheated or whatever the thing was. I'm just going to focus on everything I want. I don't think that it's like sweeping it into the closet is enough for it to go away.
It's not. And that's, you know, I also love Abraham Hicks. And I also think that most people can't have success doing that way, because I think you could get to a certain level, right, where you can start making that shift. Let's say you have an area that you don't have a lot of trauma in, you don't have a lot of beliefs, and you're kind of just venturing to like an area that you haven't been before. You might be able to utilize that. I think that kind of attitude paired with also actually looking, like taking the time, the way I like to prescribe it, so to speak, is if that's something that's coming up, you know, you have something that's going on in your relationship area, take that time and actually schedule it in. So schedule in some sacred time with yourself, whether it's like in the morning after your meditation or it's in the evening or whatever. Make a date with yourself so it has like a container. So it's not just like you thinking about it throughout the whole day, because that'll just be a mess, right? And create that sacred container and being like, okay, I'm going to look at this. Obviously, this area of my life, the area, I would like to say, the area of your life that's like causing you pain, or the area of your life that's not working, is the area that's like on the altar to be dealt with right now. And that's really as simple as it is. We don't have to judge it. I believe that as souls, like we came in here with a certain path and certain like lessons we wanted to learn and certain things that we had. We chose to have certain blocks, and we've had, you know, some of our blocks go as far back as other lifetimes, right? Our childhood, all different kinds of things, the media, there's so many ways. And so the thing that's on your plate, like in that example with the relationship, is really just your soul being like, okay, this is the next assignment, let's dive in. And so diving in, to me, to create like real transformation and real change and shift in that area, is really looking at, okay, what are the beliefs I have around whatever it is I'm manifesting? So in that example, having an amazing relationship, like what I kind of do in the process of the book, steps 2 and 3, steps 2 would be looking at, okay, well, kind of what Abraham Hicks is saying in a little bit, what is my dream relationship? What are the things that are really important? What do I really like? And you could do that for whatever, career, money, health, whatever. Like, what's the ideal scenario when you connect to your soul, right? Not our ego, but our soul, what's really important to our soul. And then asking the question, okay, what beliefs, what comes up for me when I think about having that? Because our programming is sometimes, hilariously obvious, right? It comes as simple, if someone who's watching this has never made $1 million, right? You could simply just say to yourself, I made $1 million, and then watch all of the thoughts that come up after it, right? Like, you don't know how to make $1 million. Nobody in your family ever made $1 million. Like, if you made $1 million, the tax people are going to come get you. I don't know, whatever, right? We have all these things that come up. And so looking at that, as soon as you see what you want, is also looking at what makes me believe I can't have it, right? And so in that scenario with the relationship, I think what can be helpful, right, of the Abraham Hicks version of that is that if you're on the vibration, right, which, and this is kind of jumping around, but like step 4, right, in my little manifesting through meditation process in the book is quantum embodiment. So that's kind of what they're skipping to, is like embody the you that's in that ideal relationship, that's looking for all the good. And what actually will happen in that scenario, if you're doing that and that's your practice, and that's a good practice while simultaneously also looking at your blocks, right? And then what happens is you're clearing your blocks, you're keeping that vibration. And if that person that you're in partnership with is not the right match, it's going to fall away. It's going to be so easy. And most likely it's also going to be really peaceful. It's just going to kind of be like, oh, wow, we're literally just on different wavelengths. And like, you're a great person and I'm a great person and we're not meant to be together. And so there's the magic of bringing that in. But I think the important part is doing that inner work, because what happens if you don't do that inner work, you're going to attract the same person again in a different form, which is why I think, oftentimes when we're in situations that we feel disgruntled in, whether it's like a job we don't like, or a relationship that's struggling, or a financial situation, or whatever it is, something that's like we're not happy about, our reflex sometimes is just to like jump off the ship and be like, this is awful, I'm jumping off, right? And obviously in certain like abusive situations and like really negative situations, you do that, you save yourself, you jump off the ship. In situations that are just not ideal, there is just work to be done there. And if you do the work in that relationship or that job or that career, what will happen is that career will either transform into, I had a girl in one of my programs that was doing this work around her career and thought what she was going to manifest was leaving her job and starting her own, yoga business. And what actually happened was through clearing that work, doing the clearing work, and simultaneously holding that space for how she wanted to feel, she got a promotion. Her job got more flexible hours. She started doing more of the things that she liked doing, right? And her job actually transformed to meet her in a space she didn't even know was possible, right? And so that can happen too. But yeah, I think it's important that you have to do the work simultaneously, because our brains and our unconscious are really, really powerful. And so if we're not actually taking the time to like really reprogram them, then they're going to just catch up to us. You can't, if you're not doing that deeper work, you can't, I really don't believe you can fake it, because you'll be saying those things, but underneath you'll still be feeling like, oh, I'm lying to myself, and you're not going to get anything, like nothing can manifest from that place.
Yeah, I feel like because Abraham is a group of like, souls and not humans, they don't understand the complexity of trauma, the nervous system, human emotions, repetitive thoughts. So the way they see it is like, oh, it's so simple. Just like be in the reality that you want to be in and just like live like that. And it's like, no, we humans are not so simple. Like if there is a wound there, and it's lifelong, like there are always more and more things to unravel. But when you finally get to this core thing, like for example, recently in my relationship, I had this realization that there was like something within me that didn't want to totally give. Like when I would see like women like like a friend of mine, she has this course on like washing the man's feet and like worshiping the man. And it triggered me. And I was like, why would you worship a man? Like after everything they've done to us, like why would I worship him? But when I really got to be quiet with myself and start to question those thoughts, it was because I was holding on to anger towards the masculine because of the patriarchy. And I was like, you patriarchy have wounded us feminine for so many years and have impregnated us and left us and used our wombs as properties. And I was still holding on to this anger that's generational, that's past lives, that's still even happening today. So if I didn't look at that, which is painful, which requires a conversation, which is confronting, I wouldn't have been able to, first of all, luckily I was in this beautiful relationship, but our relationship got to get so much deeper and more loving and more beautiful from going into that more sticky territory. So I would love to know, what are these 4 steps of manifestation that you've outlined in your book?
Yeah. And I love that you said that. I think that brings, up a important point that I think both of us share kind of naturally, is that we're in it for the journey, and we find even those kind of like confronting dark moments I don't know if satisfying is the right word.
Oh, it was like the highlight of my trip. I'm like, yes.
Right. And that's such an important, I think, attitude to have towards it, right? Because so the 4 steps, just to go through, and I go through these in my book, Manifesting Through Meditation. It's the first thing that I walk you through is 1, remembering who you are. And so remembering who you are is remembering that you are the divine, right? You're your soul, you're your essence, you are infinite. And that, I think, is the most important part. And, we've talked sometimes about like common things that people, mess up during manifestation, right? I think this is the thing that people skip, that actually you cannot skip because the whole process requires you to actually know that you are unlimited, right? And so we have to connect to that unlimited self. And that is the first step to being a conscious creator of your reality and to manifesting and divinely designing your life. So the first step is really that. And I have 10 different meditations for all different kind of angles you can hit that at, because there are many different ways we can connect to that essence inside of us. It can start from what we were just talking about at the start of this conversation, can be as simply as tuning into your heart and allowing allowing your physical being and your external world to just melt away and just be in the essence of your heart. I really like going into the quantum field, which is when we allow ourselves to dissolve and simply become our essence. And that's one of the things that I find is so important for manifestation, is why meditation is so important for manifestation, is having these experiences. The more that we experience the truth of who we are, the more that we take that remembrance into our day-to-day life. And that completely shifts how we approach everything in our life and what we think is possible for ourselves. So through that initial remembering of who we actually are, what happens is that it kind of like cracks open all of those kind of beliefs and those limitations that the world has clung on us. And we start being able to see the cracks in them, right? We start being able to be like, oh, my human identifies with this not being possible, but like my soul says it is, right? And so that's the first step. We just need to start cracking that and connecting to that possibility. And like you said, this is a lifelong journey. So it's not about like you meditate one time and you're like, I'm a divine essence, right? It's a practice. And what happens is, I like to think of it as like, we all have collective like forgetfulness, right? And we came here, and every day we have so many things in this world that make us forget who we are, that I like to think if you had a loved one with Alzheimer's, right? It's like, I don't know, I don't have a loved one with Alzheimer's, but this is just kind of like the metaphor that comes up for me. You might create a little like love box for them, right? In a box that they can open up every morning, and kind of maybe there's pictures of all of your family members, and this is your mom and this is your dad and we love you, and like little love notes to kind of remind them where they are and who's around them, to make that transition a little bit easier for the day with them. We as souls all need that every morning. We need to be like, oh, hey Cassandra, you're not just this body, you're not just this reality. Like, you've been through so much more than this. And so that's step one. And then step
I
two.
so want to make a love box. I love
Right? That's another ritual, right? And I think that's what we get to do. We get to, one of the practices I love to do around that, which is, I write a little note to myself, and I update it every once in a while, but I write a little love note to myself. It's like, good morning, Cassandra. This is a reminder of who you really are, and you're infinite, and and your desires are divine. And I write a little love note, and then I either read it. Sometimes I have it in my meditation space and I read it. Or what I like to do recently is I record it on my voice recordings, and I just play it for myself while I'm getting ready in the morning, while I'm like brushing my teeth and like washing my face and doing that stuff. And then going into my meditation, obviously, is another thing that, just taking that time reminds me, oh, okay, there's so much more than what I can see with my physical eyes going on here. And then step two is connecting to our soul's desires. And this is really important because our souls have divine seeds of desire within them that are meant to be blossomed in our life. And so when we get to our soul's desires, we're getting beyond the outside world, right? It's not so much just like, oh, like so and so has that, so I want that, or so and so is doing that, so I want that. It's like, okay, yeah, there might be clues around you that are triggering you, but then it's like really getting deep into our soul and saying, what is the experience that my soul came here to have? Because each and every one of us are on a unique journey. And when we start manifesting from those desires, that's when things really get kicking, because we're manifesting from that place of knowing that this divine desire wouldn't be planted inside of you if it wasn't part of your soul's path in this lifetime to watch it unfurl, right? And then step three, which we were talking about, which I feel like most people shy away from, but is the most powerful in my opinion, is where we clear the fears and the limiting beliefs and the wounds that we came out here. Because I really believe we have these divine desires that are planted in us. We are naturally infinite potential, right? We're naturally divine creators. That's who we are in our real essence. And so the only reason one of our desires hasn't yet to manifest in the physical form is because we actually have something that's blocking its arrival, right? And I think that's a really empowering perspective to look at it, as being like, okay, it's like a me and me game here. It's not me versus the world. It's just me versus me, which I can handle. And so it's looking at, okay, if I haven't experienced this thing, I haven't experienced that loving relationship, I haven't experienced that career, I haven't experienced that whatever it is that I want to experience, there's just simply something in my field that's clogging the path. And all I need to do is assess what it is and allow myself to clear it. And so there are many different ways you can clear it. I have, again, like in the book, there's 10 different meditations for each step that give you a variety of ways to move things through you and out of you. And then even beyond that, like I said, so much of it is looking at it. And I have also an exercise about creating an inventory, so you can really, do a meditation and then really get clear and download, like, these are exactly the reasons that I'm not, that this is not coming through. And then we can dismantle, right? So one of the meditations in that section is bringing it to a divine truth test. So we bring up this belief that we have, and we allow ourselves to see the evidence that we've created for this belief. And then we bring it to the divine truth test, and we're able to see, well, what is the highest truth of this belief? Is it really stand up to it? And that's a process that, again, our brains need to go through, right? Our brains need to start unwiring, because we are evidence building machines. So if you have a belief, like you said, that, you had some anger towards men, or men were unworthy or negative, or whatever that belief was, right? You've spent your whole life building a strong case file for, look at the patriarchy doing that, look at men did that men, can you believe the Me Too movement? Like, you built, right? And here's the thing, we live in a world that you can build a case file for anything. You can build a case file for any belief. And so it's not so much about saying, like, let's say in your example, right? It's not so much about saying like there haven't been men that have done horrible things, right? It's not about invalidating that at all, but it's also about connecting to the highest truth, right? And what's the highest truth, right? And that's not that anyone is inherently evil, and certainly not that anyone is inherently evil because of their sex, right? Or whatever they identify as, right? And so we bring it to the highest truth, and then all of a sudden it dismantles all of this evidence we've built, right? And so for some things, depending on the experience, for some things you're going to have to sit with it a few times, right? For some things you might, there's all different ways. Like in my Divinely Design Your Life program, we do bilateral reprogramming to help reprogram the brain from whatever, experiences it had. We do tapping. You can get a shamanic healing, or there's all different like healing mechanisms that you can do to face that. But it's really important that you do face it. And sometimes it can literally be as simple. Sometimes I think we overcomplicate it. It can be as simple as questioning it, right? And asking myself, one of the things I have people do in the fear inventory is really just saying, okay, these are the beliefs I have. And then going back and saying, okay, what evidence have I created around these beliefs? And then asking, like, do I really know it's true? And then do I want it to be true? Is it really helpful for it to be true? And even just asking those questions kind of, again, like we were talking about in the beginning, creates those like cracks for the light to get in, the cracks for the understanding to come in, the cracks for more evidence on the contrary to come in. And then the last step is quantum embodiment. And this, I think, is what sometimes we see with like Abraham Hicks or even like affirmations and whatever. But for me, it's way deeper than that. Quantum embodiment is actually you becoming the version of yourself that would have that thing you're manifesting. You really, and taking actual literal action in your day around that. So it's thinking, okay, if I'm someone that's in a loving relationship, if that's the thing, what are the things that would literally need to change in my day? Right? Would I need to maybe if I'm not in that, maybe I do need to prioritize time for dating. Maybe I'm going to clean up my house so that it would be suitable to have someone over for dinner, right? And really looking at those things. And if you want to be a CEO or, of a multi-million-dollar company, it's also asking yourself, okay, well, what are the practices that person has? What would I have to do to play at that level? And really embodying that. And it can be something also as simple as, I find a lot of the women that I work with, it's also sometimes it shifts how they dress. When they see them in that next level self, they're like, oh, actually, I'd wear more of this color, or I'd do this, or, it's always the most self-expressed highest self of us, right? That we're embodying regardless, whatever we're manifesting. But that's really where we bring it into our lives. And we look at what are the things in our daily routine? What are the things we can shift so that it's not just this kind of pink icing on a dirt cupcake version of, I'm going to say some affirmations. I'm going to do the same old thing I've been doing for years, but just say, I'm a millionaire, or I'm in a loving relationship, and expect something to change.
I love how that really touches upon the different facets of spirituality in general, right? It's the highs, it's the lows, it's the truth, it's the lies, it's all of it. And I love how you like put it together in such a clear system that anyone can follow. And you mentioned about the truth test. I'd love to know a little bit more about how we can conduct a truth test.
Yeah. So it's one of the meditations in the book, but a similar way you could do it is what I talk about in the book is making that fear inventory, right? So first we need to know like what we need to question. And so I recommend starting off with just one specific thing that you want to manifest, because like we said before, this is a lifelong journey. We all have a lot of stuff we need to clear, but it's helpful to be like, what's most present with my heart right now that I want to move forward, right? So get that, for anyone that's listening, just pop that in your head right now. You can do this while you're listening to it. And then ask yourself, if me or Sahara were next to you right now and we're like, hey, why don't you have that already? What would you tell us, right? That's the lie we need. That's the thing that we need to look at, right? Whatever you would say. And that, comes with you just being honest with yourself, right? And sometimes doing it with a close girlfriend is a great exercise because it's someone that like you would just be completely candid with, right? And wouldn't judge you for whatever that, thing was. Because whatever follows that question, regardless, it's going to feel true to you right now. Probably you're going to be like, no, but it's really true. Like, I don't have anyone in my life that knows how to make money. Or it is really true. It's so hard to date after the pandemic, right? Like, whatever it is, it's going to feel so true to you. But you have to honor that whatever that is, that's the number one thing that's blocking you from getting what you want, right? And so sitting with that, and then the divine truth test, I'll read you a little bit from the book. It says, when you start looking at the fears getting in your way, it's important to take them through a divine truth check. Often we build up evidence for our fear based on our own earthly limiting thinking, and we need to surrender it to the divine to see it clearly. When we do this, we manifest a miracle. We shift our fear-based thinking to a love-centered truth and open up the path to divine creation. So we take a look at that thing that you just gave us that excuse for why you don't have it, and you're going to sit. The way I recommend doing is sitting it in your meditation and breathing in and out of your heart. So you're just breathing in and out of your heart and holding that truth. You're just sitting with that statement. Let's say it's hard to date after the pandemic, or I don't know anyone that's ever made this much money. So you're not trying to do anything to it. You're just activating your heart center while holding that truth. And then you call in whatever divine help you want to assist you. So for me, I call it my divine support squad, any angels, guides, loved ones that have passed over, obviously, God, the universe, anybody that you work with that you want to connect to, source, love, whatever that word is for you, it's fine. So you're calling in your divine support into this container. And then you want to invite them to surround you in the space with this thought, right? And then so you want to feel your heart holding this thought in this space, and they're kind of sharing their perspectives on it. So the way I do this in the meditation is I connect a heart cord from your heart to I call them your higher counsel, to your higher counsel's heart. So you're all connected and you're receiving each other's truths. And then you're just breathing in that, and you're breathing in what are the messages, what are the visions that they're sending you in this scenario about the real truth of the matter, what's coming in. And in this space, you've essentially surrendered this truth. You've said, okay, this is something I want to look at. You've already loosened your attachment to it, right? Because you're open for them. And so just sitting there and receiving whatever messages come through, in your heart, because just bringing into your heart space is also going to start dislodging things, right? And then seeing what is the highest truth in this scenario. And so in that, what happens is once you start letting that flow, and you can sit there as long as it takes, right, for you to just be there, you're going to start feeling more of the heart-centered energy of limitless possibilities, of, infinite abundance. And when it comes through, you're going to ask them ask your higher consciousness for a divine truth statement. So this is going to be a statement that I call a little bit of a medicine mantra. So it's going to be a medicine to help heal that truth. So for instance, maybe it's like, if you're going to the truth, it's really hard to date after the pandemic, right? And then maybe the medicine mantra you get is that, my divine love, is on its way, or my divine love, exceeds any circumstances, right? Or my relationship is going to come to me in, magical timing, or, my heart is always guiding me to find, my true partner, right? There's so many different options. And I recommend you sit until you feel one that you genuinely resonate with. So for instance, and this is where I think that technicality comes in around like some of the Abraham Hicks stuff or like affirmations, right? The important part of this is finding something that you can attach to, something that really does resonate with your heart. So maybe it's not that I'm going to meet my soulmate tomorrow and it's just he's going to knock on my door, right? Maybe it is something that my heart is open to love and therefore I know it's on its way, right? Or maybe it's something that like I trust that everything is unfolding in divine timing and it's going to be so I'm going to know exactly why it took this long to meet him when I do, right? Whatever it is. And so bringing that from your heart truth and then bringing that into your day-to-day life when you come back into the room. And I always recommend writing down that statement, having it with you, even setting little phone alarms with that statement for every hour. I have some of my clients do this so that you're reminded, if you're neural reprogramming now, that whenever essentially the spiritual aspect of it was that we gave up this truth, we surrendered it to a higher power. It was alchemized, because it always is when we ask for a miracle. And in A Course in Miracles, it says all we need is the willingness. So your first step is the willingness to like not want to believe this because it's getting in your way. And that's all you need. And so it will be alchemized in whatever way it needs to be alchemized at this time for you to believe it in your heart and expand to the possibilities and the truth of it. And then the neural reprogramming of that is why we receive that divine truth statement. Because then what happens is whenever that old truth comes in and you find yourself, maybe you're on the phone, you find yourself being like, oh, so hard to date or whatever, and you hear yourself saying it again and you hear it in your head, maybe, now you have this new truth statement to counter it with. So now you're like, oh, caught myself saying that. My new truth statement is I know that my divine love is on its way and everything's happening in perfect timing, right? And what that's doing is that now we've handled it on both the spiritual and your biological plane, right? Because we're actually reprogramming that in. And I think that's really beautiful. Again, if you have like a close friend that you chat with about everything, to let them know about the things that you're reprogramming so that they can lovingly call you out on it. If you do make that, comment about, oh, Bumble is the worst or whatever it is, right? They're going to be like, oh, wait, I thought you told me that your divine love was on its way in perfect timing, right? And it may be kind of silly and fun. It's totally fine to be silly and playful with it. Actually, it's a great energy of reprogramming, right? I often think some of the best medicine for reprogramming those beliefs is laughing at them, right? Is when they come up, being able to be like, you see Stephen doing something cute and you think in your head, oh, I can't believe I, thought he was like part of the patriarchy or whatever, right? And you just like have that moment of like giggling to yourself, right? That's such powerful reprogramming to actually like laugh at an old belief. So that's a little bit about the divine truth test.
I love that so much. And it's so clear and it's so helpful too, because what it really brings up for me is our relationship with time and how we have this idea in our head that things actually need to take a certain amount of time. And it's this, and it's actually not really true. It's just the amount of time it takes for you to shift that belief. And that's it.
And that's exactly, it's like, I think we both experienced this with like numerous different things, that sometimes you can literally shift a belief that you've held on to for lifetimes in one moment of awareness, right? Like similarly, similar to kind of what you were just unpacking in your relationship, I had unpacked a little bit ago about so many lifetimes that I had where, because I was, a wife and a mother and whatnot, like I was held down from my purpose and I wasn't able to speak my mind. And I had so much anxiety about it in this lifetime. And it was crazy because literally just bringing that, like having that awareness of where that came from and looking at it and then being able to look at it kind of in the light of day, so to speak, and be like, oh, that's not this though. Like, that's not this lifetime. That's not my situation right now, dispels it. And so I think there's just, some of the meditations in the book are kind of wild in that way, because you could read it on the paper and be like, this is way too simple. But if you actually do it, you'll, I think, be blown away at how fast, when you're, and I think the caveat there is your degree of willingness, right? If you're super willing, if you're like, dude, this belief is awful, it's not helpful, causing me pain, that it's like you're giving it up, and you can shift it. And so, yeah, I think you're absolutely right. It sometimes it takes time, and sometimes it can happen in an instant, and it's really, anything is possible, which is incredible.
And to anyone that does have that belief about men, I met Stephen within 1 month of doing this really deep healing work with the masculine. And within 1 month, I met him, and I met him on Bumble. So you just never know.
It's so true.
Here's an expansive story for anyone holding on to that one.
Same here with mine. I really was just looking at it. I remember having that like big aha of like, oh wow, I'm like consciously going for these guys that are unavailable and unattached, because I had some fear, around commitment. And as soon as I was able to look at that and like I think I just did some, some meditation around it and some journaling around it. And then like, boom, Patrick came in.
The most committed guy ever.
Literally.
Yeah.
I was like, but it's true. If I had met him any sooner, I would not have been able to handle it.
Yeah. I love that so much. And yeah, it's beautiful, because we were taught since growing up, like, it takes this much time to graduate, and it takes this much time for this to happen, and this much time that, and that's the number one limiting belief I see amongst like my students, of like, well, how much time is it going to take for me to be successful like this? Or how much time they think it's like this transaction of like, if I put in this much time, then this thing is guaranteed to happen. And like, first of all, dropping any guarantee, because like, even you mentioned your student who really wanted to start her own business, but source guided her into getting a promotion and getting the things she wanted in different ways. So like, releasing any guarantee of like, I'm doing it for the specific reason. And I'd love to hear your take on specific versus non-specific manifestors, which is something that you can see in your human design chart based off of the top right corner arrow. I believe if it's facing left, you're a non-specific, facing right, specific. Do you know if that one's correct?
Yeah. So yeah, you can look at it in your human design chart that way. I often find though, just from, because I do that like usually with my clients, or when we program, I do all their charts and whatnot, astrological and human design. But I have found that I don't even need to look at it, because most people, and I'm sure if you're listening to this, you're in touch with yourself. So it's usually exactly the one that feels good. One's going to feel good and the other one's not going to feel good. So you don't have to freak out about it. If it feels good for you and you're manifesting, to get really specific, i.e., be like, I want like a blue house 2 blocks from the ocean with 5 rooms, and it's going to cost X amount of money, or whatever it is, right? If that like gets your juices flowing, then you're specific. If you're someone that's just like, oh, I like feel an ocean breeze and it's spacious and I can walk to a place, and, and you're a little bit more, just in the feeling and the vibe of it, then you're a non-specific. And I think that is really important. So for me, I'm a non-specific manifester. And so for me to get really, really detailed about something, it feels constrictive. It doesn't feel good. And vice versa, like I have friends that are specific manifestors, and for them to leave it too vague doesn't feel good, right? And so I think, one, just right now, honoring, like, forget what anybody's ever told you about manifesting. Like if you came from a practice that was dogmatic in either direction, in my book, Manifesting Through Meditation, I allow this, I talk about like going whichever way kind of resonates with you. Because the bigger part is we're always manifesting the essence, right? And that's one of the things that, there's a meditation for it in the book. And there's also, an explanation about getting your desires down to their essence, because we're only ever manifesting the essence of it, right? So we think we're manifesting, we attach all of these, like how it has to happen, the timing of how it has to happen, what it might look like, in this, reality that we have. But the truth is that our soul desire is for an experience and a feeling and an essence. And so it's fine if to invigorate that essence, you need to get specific for your practice. That's totally fine. And I always say this or something better, right? So specific manifestors, the specificity of what they're manifesting may help them in activating that feeling inside of them of what they really want. And then sometimes they'll find that they manifest the exact thing that they were specific about. And other times they're going to manifest something that feels exactly the same as the specific thing that they're manifesting, right? But is better, right? Because we're always working with the divine. So we can only see with our limited human mind. And when we give our desires up, they're like, oh my God, Sahara thinks she wants this one house, but what she doesn't see is that there's actually mold in the basement of it. So we're not going to give her that house because we don't want that for her. We're going to give her this other house that embodies all of the energy and like all of the things she really wants in a house. It's going to be like 4 blocks away that doesn't have any mold, right? And so sometimes that happens and you're like, wait, why didn't I get that house that I wanted? And you don't realize that you were protected for something, or there's something even better that's on the block that's coming your way. And then for non-specific manifestors, that's just really honoring how, like, again, getting down to that essence. How does it feel? What is it's for me actually right now, it's funny. We're manifesting a house, but I've had trouble kind of manifesting this house because I manifested the place we're living in right now and I love it so much. And it was the feeling of it, right? And I didn't even know when I was manifesting this place we live in now, I didn't even know that. I just knew I wanted to feel like I lived in a hotel. Right. And I wanted that feeling of just feeling like everything being like really nice and clean and supported. And I wanted to feel safe. And I wanted like space, like I knew like these kind of like overarching things. And then I was guided to something that had all of that, right? Instead of like having that specificity. And so I think it's just honoring that in yourself and kind of what you were saying about the timing of it. And also it's like both timing and the how. We think, I also met my partner on a dating app, right? And I have some girlfriends that are like so against it, right? And to me, that's micromanaging the how, right? And it's like, if you want something, be open to all the different ways it could happen, right? If you want, sometimes we're like, I want to make X amount of money, but I only want to make it through this one thing, right? And it doesn't mean that you can't do that. You could make it through a one thing, right? But why are we limited? Why are we limiting the ways that it can come to us? And so I think, yeah, getting down to the divine essence, honoring for your manifesting process, what gets you excited, right? Does it feel good to have those like kind of broad strokes feelings and evoke that, or do the specific details evoke those feelings, right? Because that's the important part of it. Yeah. And then just, it's so funny you were talking about that with time. I remember I was actually in Miami like eons ago for an Oprah event. And what kept on coming through to me at the Oprah event was, it'll happen as fast as you let it. It'll happen as fast as you let it. And we have all these preconceived notions from, the 3D world, how long certain things have to take. And it's all just stuff we made up.
So true. And I think both of us are living testaments to that, like from the lives we live and the content that we've created and books we've written. And, everyone is on their own journey. But for us, I think our commitment to really starting this work at a pretty young age allowed us to create things that could have, the story could have been, oh, it's not until I'm 40 that I can give advice to other people, or it's not until I'm, this or that, but we just quantum leaped. And I think that that's the magic that any spiritual practice has. And that's really what manifestation is about. It's about not waiting for the block to like naturally clear with time and, just gained wisdom that we get through life experience, but to like go into it. And that going into it is just a realization that people are like, so many people I see, it's like, it wasn't until my 30s that I started to love my body. It wasn't until my 50s that I gained confidence. It doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be you wait until a certain amount of time and then it naturally shifts. You can become confident at age 15 years old. Like that's actually possible. Like that wasn't my experience, but that is actually possible if we have these tools and these conversations at that age.
Absolutely. And a really fun exercise you can do every day is just tapping into the infinite possibilities of that day, right? And like actually having that attitude of, and sometimes this is like I don't know, one of those like little pep talks I give myself, right? Where I think about, and I'm sure you probably had experiences like this too, knowing your life, but there have been certain days that you receive an email or a phone call or something happens and it totally changes your life, right? And all of a sudden you're like, whoa, okay, I'm going to be an author. Whoa, I'm going to do this. Oh, this program is launching. Oh, this partnership just happened. Like, it's like they're just, when we bring it down, those moments that have completely quantum leaped our life happened on a Tuesday at 3 p.m., right? Like there was nothing like particular ceremonious about it, right? It was like an average day that when we woke up that morning, maybe we had no idea, right? What was about to happen, right? The day that we swiped on our men, right? Like it was just another day looking on the app, right? And it's like that, you know, I think about that with like in my life when I got called like from ABC, like from producers to be on a TV show that completely changed my whole journey, right? It was just a regular day. I was like actually getting on a New Jersey transit bus to go visit a girlfriend, you know, and it was so random. And same thing with like, you know, so many big moments in my life when I had a beautiful idea for Divinely Design Your Life or a different course or whatever, just an average day, right? And so going into that of like this day to day holds infinite possibilities, right? There could be, today could be the day that I get my $1 million idea. Today could be the day that I swipe on my future husband. Today could be the day that I have a conversation that completely changes the way I think and feel about my body. Today could be a day that I, you know, meditate and finally connect to this infinite space inside of me and it heals something I went through in my childhood. And that shifts everything, right? You know, every day we have infinite possibilities available to us. And if we stay in that like that's what I would consider the receiving mode, right? Is like being in that space of like, it could happen today.
I love that. It can happen at any moment and we can choose any moment too. It's like you can choose like today is going to be one of the best days of my life. Like today I am going to create something magical and create that container for yourself too, because I think sometimes we're like, we wait for the genius to strike. We wait for the person to find us. We wait for that idea. We wait for that. And it's like, no, you get to choose it. And the way that you choose it is by creating that container and creating that time. And then if you start showing up for yourself every single day of like, this is my creative time where I channel the idea of my business or whatever it is, it's going to start showing up. It's going to be like, okay, she's a regular now. She's tuning in. Now we finally have the space to come through. But if you're just like on TikTok and then you're on Instagram, and then you're on this and then you're on that, there's no space for that genius, that manifestation to come through. So it's like carving that time. And the other thing I want to mention about the specific versus non-specific is in my human design, I'm a non-specific. I have specifically manifested that like, you, for example, I actually did a ritual with you a while ago on an apartment. And this is very similar to kind of both of the apartments that I lived in. Deepak Chopra is probably my biggest manifestation. And it wasn't specific as like, I'm going to meet him this month, but I just knew I needed to meet him. But my thing about specific manifesting is I feel like it has this energy of control. It has this energy of, I know what's best. And this energy of, if it's not perfect, then I don't want it. Whereas in life, nothing is perfect. Like everything is going to have its ups and its downs. And I feel like sometimes when we've had this conversation or when people are like, I need the pink mansion with the red lock and the this and that. And if it's not that, they're like, well, then it's not for me. It's like, well, then you're setting yourself up for a life of a lot of disappointment if you're going to be that specific. So I'd love for you to share a little bit about that because I see it happening a lot.
Yeah. So, well, it's actually interesting because according to human design, we're all evolving to being non-specific, right? So we all started, well, collectively as a species, we started out more specific. And as we raise our consciousness or we ascend more, we're getting more and more non-specific, right? So, and that happens not just in general with like your chart, right? But also in your life, right? I think the more you evolve, the more non-specific you get in that way. And like I said, I think if you are a specific, it's more so using the specificity to create the feeling, right? Not to be married to that specificity, right? Because it is what happens there is you're absolutely right. It becomes controlling and essentially you're trying to play God, right? You're trying to play God and you think that you know what's best for you. And that's why you never, all my ladies, all my single ladies out there, you never manifest a specific person. Never. You manifest the qualities and the feelings that you want to have in that relationship, right? And what happens is you manifest, and trust me, in my younger years, I would do my little rituals and my stuff for specific men that I was dating. And what happens is I prolonged relationships that were not meant for me, right? Yes. Did it work? Yes. Was it in my best interest? Absolutely not. Right. And so it's like you're actually talking about like time and stuff. You're slowing down your path, right? Because the longer you spend in a situation that's like not for you because you are specifically tied to that one situation, the more you're delaying the situation that you actually want to come in, right? And so I think like kind of like you were saying when whether it was like Deepak or that apartment, and I would even say with that apartment, you had a specific apartment in mind, but I feel like your energy was pretty open as well.
I didn't even know it was in Miami.
Yeah.
I wanted an ocean apartment with floor to ceiling windows.
Exactly, which is non-specific.
Yeah.
Right? Which is actually non-specific, right? Because being specific would have been like, it has to be apartment 36 in this building, right?
Oh, yeah.
Which would have been like, okay, you didn't get that apartment and you're like, the universe is against me, right? And so I think you can be specific in like the elements of it, right? And same thing, even with, Deepak, I do think sometimes, sometimes we get hits. And I think there's a difference here, right? It's deciphering what's like a soul hit and what is like, so for instance, maybe you feel like Deepak, someone listening, not you specifically, but someone listening is like, oh, I need Deepak to, he's going to endorse me. And that's going to be what like gets my Dharma coaching practice off, right? Or whatever. And they have that illusion of like that. I need that specific person to do it. So they're manifesting that. I would say it's okay for your manifesting if you're visualizing Deepak because he's the person in your consciousness right now that symbolizes an authority figure that has influence that's in your specific realm, right? But perhaps, so it's like you can visualize that, but hold it loosely. It's him or someone else. It's like, well, what is that? What are you actually manifesting? Maybe what you're really manifesting is generally an endorsement from a well-respected figure that's going to make you feel like your practice is more prestige or whatever, right? And so there may be, who knows, maybe there's like this, new hot spiritual teacher that we don't even know of yet, right? That comes into the thing and you didn't even know how to manifest that person, and that you end up becoming buddies with that person, and then they endorse you and that helps, right? So it's kind of like getting down to that essence of what am I really craving here? What does that really want? And releasing that. And I think anytime you feel like you haven't gotten what you manifested, it's usually because you were trying to do that. You were trying to control that like specificity of how it had to happen. And it actually blocks the manifestation because like, for instance, I've known people, I'm sure we both have, that like get their heart set on a certain publisher, right? Luckily, that's never really been me. I've always been like, whatever about it, you know? But like some people, and it's totally fine. It's human, right? It's human for us to have like preferences and desires, right? They get their heart set, like, if I get this publisher, then it's going to be perfect, right? Or that's the one I want. And so they could have other publishers, maybe that are even better for them, that would be even more aligned, that they reject simply because they had their heart so set on this one thing. And I think a lot of times in life, what happens is that thing can kind of trip us up because we think, again, it's just reminding yourself that we are only thinking with our limited mind, but we have infinite resources abound and we have divine support all around us. So trusting that we're held and we're being guided. And if we're putting that forth, that we're gonna, that's gonna come through for us. And so I would say for specifics, it's like, it's totally fine if you, like for me, sometimes when I was manifesting my partner, I would imagine like certain, like different famous guys that I knew, right? That were kind of in that like archetype or whatnot. And for me, that was a really helpful method because I liked seeing someone's face. Like I didn't like the idea of like just like a vague entity when I was doing that visualization. But I saw someone's face that for me was more symbolic, right? It was like a symbol of the essence of the man. And yes, maybe I saw Jake Gyllenhaal, but like, but I knew I wasn't like, it's Jake Gyllenhaal or not, I wasn't necessarily trying to marry Jake Gyllenhaal. I was like, okay, this. So I think you can use that if that's helpful for you. Find someone that's like a symbol or a thing that's a symbol, but then let it really be a symbol so that it's not like, oh, well, you don't look like Jake Gyllenhaal, so you must not be my man, right?
I think that's really what vision boards are for, right? It's like,
Yeah.
I like the energy of this. I want to remind myself of this. But I think just what a lot of people miss is it's not just looking at the vision board, it's all of the steps that you mentioned before. And I feel like no conversation of manifestation is complete without action.
Yes.
Because that's like that missing element that I know we're like really like, you got to take action too. So I see some manifestation teachers being like, action is really overrated. Like, you really don't need to take action. It's just about aligning with that thing and it will naturally happen. You just need to get out of its way. For some reason, for me, it could be my Capricorn, could be that I worked my ass off for things. It just doesn't resonate, but I'd love to know, what is your take on like action and taking inspired action while also allowing room for that receiving?
Absolutely. And I love that you brought that up because I wanted to hit on it when you were talking about before, like creating that space to have the business idea and creating that space. And I absolutely, that's like a huge part of the quantum embodiment section of this. And also, like, literally, I say in the book, like, after every meditation, take aligned action. After every single meditation, you should be checking in and asking yourself, okay, what is the aligned action I need to take? Right. And sometimes, depending on what the meditation is or what you're moving through, it may not be like a work thing, but we're always getting guidance on what we should do. And we're really meant to, like, we are the hands and feet of the divine, right? And so the divine needs us to use our hands and feet and our human to get stuff done as well. And so I think it is really, really important. And that's why I do put the quantum embodiment part in that, because so much of quantum embodiment is like, okay, do the thing. You say you want to be an author, but you never sit at your computer and write anything. What are you doing? Like you said, are you waiting for like divine inspiration to find you on TikTok? Because it probably won't, right? Because the mechanisms of the world are built to distract you from your purpose, right? And sometimes, I mean, obviously both of us have made it our mission to try to put out content that does inspire that. But the truth is that nothing is more important than you actually just sitting at your laptop, you making a date with yourself and saying, I'm going to go to my favorite coffee shop for 2 hours and write whatever I can write, and see what happens. Right. And even if I write, complete poop that day, I showed up for the muse, right? There's a great book called The War of Art that I recommend by Stephen Pressfield as well, that talks about that resistance and the muse, and especially around writing. But we do have to create that container. And what I find the difference is when you're taking aligned actions, is we're taking more targeted, specific actions. So I always say, don't write your to-do list until after your meditation. And meditate in the morning, do whatever you do to connect to that infinite self, whatever, if you're connecting to a visualization or a manifestation or whatever you're doing, whatever work you're doing that morning, and then go into your heart, connect to your support squad, highest self, whatever, and write down your to-do list from that space. Because our human brain will say, email everybody in the state of California that has ever done a yoga class to see if they want to sign up for your thing. That's a silly example, but you get the idea, right? Where your divine brain makes things so much easier for you. It doesn't mean it won't give you work, but it's going to be like, you know what? Reach out to so-and-so that runs the yoga group and let her know that you want to do this workshop, right? And so now you have like, oh, okay, I'm going to reach out to her and see what happens there. And she's going to introduce you to these other yoga studios, and it's going to be like, da, 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 da. And so it's not that we don't take action, but it's that we take more aligned action, because we're not taking action from a place of fear or lack, right? We're not taking action of like, I have to do these bajillion things, right? We're taking action with that divine alignment and that support. And so oftentimes what happens is that, yes, you still have to do the things, but you'll be given more targeted direction. And so you can do them more efficiently. But I do think, there's one of the things that came up for me recently that I think applies to this is what we were talking about. There's like a culture of doing less and less and less and less, right? And one, I will say that I think that everyone has their own missions and their own kind of assignments in this lifetime. So it's definitely honoring what your mission and your assignment and what is that life that you look at, right? I know for the two of us, like
it's definitely not that.
Definitely not that. And, for me, when I think about the life I want like a big, juicy life, right? I want to be doing all these things. I thrive off doing these, even if like sometimes I'm like, oh, I don't want to, I'm tired or whatever, but like I thrive on it,
Because there's nothing else I would honestly rather be doing. It's like, do less. And then what would I do with my time? Like, I want to have these conversations. I want to read these books. I want to write. Like, I'm not forcing myself. I feel like that, like, do less is helpful when you're doing all this shit that you don't want to do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And so I think it's tuning in. And so recently I was tuning in and I was feeling, overwhelmed with, obviously I have the book launch going on right now, and I have a bunch of other like work stuff going on, and it's a really fruitful, nice time, but I'm using a lot of my time. I'm busy, right? And so I was feeling like I was checking in with myself and saying, okay, is the assignment here? Do I need to clear some things off the calendar? Do I need to create more spaciousness for like restoration and stuff, right? And what I really got was like, no, I actually need to expand my energy. What I need to do is expand my energy to hold this all with more joy, right? With more ease, with more flow, but I'm not meant to shrink, I'm not meant to shrink, because that would mean, like you said, I looked at everything I'm doing right now, and every single thing I'm doing is aligned with my heart and soul. Like, I don't want to give any of it up. Right. And so for me, then that was a calling of like, great, my mission here is to like manifest expansion, right? It's to manifest, what does it look like holding all of this and not feeling exhausted, right? Mm-hmm. And what do I need to tweak, and what do I need to do, right, to hold all of this, right? And for a lot of that, again, that for me was just looking back and looking at limiting beliefs and clearing stuff and being like, oh, great, I had a program that said, if you work X amount, you're exhausted, but that's a lie. Because what if everything I do fuels me and gives me more energy, right? So it's just like going back and like shifting that. I will also say there are some times when I get specific instructions around certain manifestations that say, don't do anything right now, right? And so and the way I think about that is, our manifestations in our life is kind of like a stovetop, more cooking analogies, right? And so when you're cooking a big feast, you have maybe something in the oven, you have a couple of things on the stovetop that you're working on, right? Sometimes maybe you made a soup and it's simmering on the back burner, and then you have like something you're cooking so it doesn't, like vegetables so they don't burn, right? And our life is like this. Our life has all these different facets, right? And so there are different times where, like you may be in a season right now where your career is like the baked spaghetti squash in the oven that's like chilling, right? And you got a timer set for 45 minutes, and like it's already like going, and like everything, you can just let that focus. And maybe that relationship thing that you just moved through, and that was like the vegetables on the front burner. That was like, this is the time, this is what we wanted you to pay attention to right now. And then you might find, in the next season that the relationship stuff is just the soup simmering on the top, and it's just chilling, it's ready, and like, you can get it whenever you're done, but you got to focus on chopping, some vegetables, right? And the vegetables might be in your career, or the vegetables might be your new home or whatever, right? And so I do think that all works out in divine timing, right? So that oftentimes we're not meant to like have everything on the front burners, right? Because then we can go insane. So there are some times where you might check in with a certain area of things, and the message that you get is like, it's cool, it's chilling, just let it chill, and then divert your attention to the thing that needs to be, focused on right now. And that can be really powerful, because sometimes what happens is, specifically around relationships and body stuff, I find with the women that I work with, they try to make it the front burner always, right? And it doesn't serve them. Mm-hmm. And sometimes it serves those other areas. You don't even realize it, but that spaghetti squash casserole that you got in the oven, that's your career, let's say, it's cooking, it's doing stuff while you focus on the vegetables, right? And sometimes the highest good for that area is actually for you to not pay attention to it, is for you to just kind of let it be. So I think that's why it's important to really tune into your divine guidance. And there'll always be something on the front burner that you're taking the action on, that you're being more, maybe that's the thing that you're clearing your fears around. That's the thing that you're taking, you haven't had those 2 hours where you were writing planned into your day. So now that's the front burner thing, because you got to start planning those 2 hours, because that's symbolic of you being an author, right? And so we just have to listen to what that is. And again, I think that's why it's so important to have that meditation practice and to have that connection to yourself, so you can discern that, because there's always action. And I do agree, just to drive it home, I do agree one of the biggest misconceptions that's sometimes out there in the manifestation world is that you can just like not do anything. And we live in a physical world, right? So if you have this great idea for a book, but you never write it, it will never exist. Nobody's going to like download the book from your brain, write it for you, and publish it. Like, you have to do your part in it. If you dream of creating an online course, right, you're going to have to like figure out Teachable or Kajabi, or you're going to have to record some videos or audios, or however you want to do your course, right? There's always going to be our physical part in it as well. And so it's the same thing. If you lock yourself in your bedroom, for a year, like, what do you think? Like your significant other that you're meant to be with is going to like break down your door and be like, hi, I heard you were locked in your bedroom. No, we got to get out there.
I love that all so much. I just agree with everything you say. And yes, to that piece, I feel like so many people want to skip the steps. And when we talk about time, we're saying time can move a lot faster, but we don't mean you can skip the steps. Like, the book doesn't have to take you 10 years. It can happen in the next year. You still have to go through all the steps. It's just, how long is it going to take for you to let go of the resistance? And I loved the analogy of the kitchen, because of course you as a chef created that analogy, but it's so good because it's so true in my own life. What I've experienced is like different times in my life, I'm just focused on different things. Different things are in that frying pan. And then when my nervous system feels ready for that thing that was in the oven, that's when the thing in the oven will show up. Like my relationship was just in the oven for a long time. It was chilling. It was good. Finally, when I had enough space, when I wasn't flipping pancakes with my career, I
Exactly.
could look at the relationship stuff. But that wouldn't have shown up unless like the oven exploded, like a
Yep.
catastrophe happened. Then I'd be like, oh shit, I haven't looked at my relationship in like 5 years. It's just been cooking in here. So it's like, that's why we also need to be like, oh, checking in, like, okay, how's this? Is this good? Does this need to be in the front burner or not? Okay, it's good for now, and continually checking in. And then also I feel like in the spirituality space, I see these people like they're hunting for shadows. Like they're looking for shadows. They're like looking for that thing to excavate. And it's like, no, sometimes it just needs space. It just needs to be, it needs to pause. And I notice that a lot with relationships. Like with relationships, there's not that much action you can take besides doing your own clearing work. Like, yes, you can make yourself available to dating, etc. But it's really more so a releasing and allowing and doing your own healing part, and it will naturally occur. Whereas something with your career, which is like super in the physical, super action oriented, like you can chip at that by taking action every single day. In fact, if you want to make massive strides, that is what it's going to take. So it's like looking at the different things you're manifesting. If it's like writing a book, it's like, yes, you can sit for a while and channel your best thoughts, but your best thoughts are more likely going to come when you're taking action. So it's having those different styles of cooking for the different things you're manifesting. Add it on to
Yeah,
it.
I love that. And it is true. It's like with any aspect of manifesting, there's always practical action you can take, right? That is going to help put you um you know put you in opportunistic places, right? So for instance, I would say with the dating thing, it's like, hey, if you want to go ham on like dating, like go on a date 5 nights a week, right? Download a couple apps, tell your friends that you're interested in finding a person. Think to yourself, hey, where does my ideal person, where might they hang out? Right? What thing do I want us to have mutually in common, right? Like you and Steven love music festivals, right? So if you're like, oh, that'd be cool if I had a partner that also liked music festivals, okay, go to some music festivals or whatever it is, right? Oh, I want to find a partner that like also likes, good cooking, or I don't know, go to like food events or something, right? Like there's so much, like we can make ourselves more available, right, for that divine help by putting ourselves in that situation, right? And same thing, like I said, with like career, even with like health, it's like, okay, well, tuning in for your health and stuff, and then doing what you think, doing with the next intuitive action. Maybe you're just like, okay, well, the things I know I can do right now is drink a bunch of water, get good sleep, and move my body. So let me just start there, right? Let me just start getting into action there, and then I'll be led, because I do feel like us energetically doing something like that says to the universe, like, I'm ready and I'm showing up my part. And I really do believe that we're met in those places. We're met with that energy that we have towards it. But again, it's also kind of what we were refining before. It's like it can't be from a place of control or micromanaging it, or because we can't force it. So it's like, okay, you know what? A way I use to kind of get around that, in a way, I don't know if get around is the right word, but like I always say a prayer before I take massive action, right? So I'm going to take massive action, something like, for instance, like we were reaching out to different people who had like done articles and stuff on me before for the book, right? And just being like, hey, we've already like done work together, like would you be interested in talking about my new book, right? Completely like normal practical world action, right? And so, but for me, before I send out any of those emails, I say a prayer, and I say, like, dear God, angels, guides, like, please, let the people who most resonate with me and whose audiences are most going to be served by this book, let this email find them, right? And let this email find them in a good time, in a space where they're available and they're open. And I trust that whoever gets this and is excited to do it is aligned, and whoever doesn't, that is cool too, right? And so I think in those moments, it's the same thing. Like I was decided when I was like, I'm ready to meet my person. I went on dates like almost every night. Right. And that was my way of saying, okay, you know, I'm going to put myself out there. I'm putting myself in situations where there's constant possibility, and I'm allowing myself, you know, and also I welcome in your divine guidance. So I'm not trying to make the wrong guy work. I'm not trying to force the wrong blog feature or whatever. I'm not trying to force anything, but I'm going to make myself available. And I think that that's something that, you know, that also just helps you in general, because that quote that says success is actually moving from failure to failure without lack of enthusiasm, right? I think it's the truest thing. And how do you move from failure to failure without lack of enthusiasm, without losing any enthusiasm? Is knowing that you're being divinely guided, right? Is knowing that it's okay if it's not, if that date didn't work out, he wasn't your guy, great, on to the next. You had a fun evening, or maybe you learned something or whatever, right? If you sent out, you know, you launched that course and it's crickets, great. Look, you learned how to launch a course, on to the next, right? What's next? What can you learn? What can you improve? And that's when what happens is when we try to like hold our little hands on it so tightly, we waste time again, forcing something that's not meant to happen. And then we miss that divine momentum, right?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes it's like we have to take a bunch of different actions that don't work out to hit the one that does, you know. And oftentimes the more that we're tapping in, the less, you know, the less that kind of needs to happen. But sometimes, you know, we don't know what everything is for. And so sometimes you could have something that, you know, the first time I talked to the publisher for this book, I was talking to them about, you know, a different idea I had. And we both kind of just ended the call being like, oh, we both like each other, but like this is not the right thing right now, you know. And had I been in that space and just been like, you know, oh, like F them or whatever, you know, that they didn't like this thing, you know, how would I know that just a few months later, they out of the blue reached out and was like, oh, actually, like, we were thinking about you because of that conversation. And I can't even tell you how many times that's happened in my life, where something appeared to be a closed door, but was really just then like came back a few months later and ended up being an even more aligned opportunity.
Mm-hmm. I love that so much because it just shows that manifesting is not so much about gaining, but it's also about releasing. And it's also about everything that you say no to or the universe says no to, and that, you know, rejection is redirection and protection, and to not force something, and to also trust that, like, for example, let's say you were shopping your book deal and you got rejected, but like you knew like this specific book in your heart, like it needed to be this book. Okay, that's okay. I'm rejected and I'm going to find my perfect publisher. But you also, with that book, you were like, I'm open to writing a book. I love this book. And when this new idea hit, you were like, I even resonate with this one right now in this moment of time even more. And the exact same thing happened to me with my Ayurveda book, my first one. I wrote this book. I was so set. I got rejected. And then the publisher reached out to me to write Idiot's Guide to Ayurveda, which ended up being exactly what I needed to write. So it's like allowing the no's to happen with grace. And like, even still, like I had this idea for another deck and I sent it to my agent. She's not really responding. I'm not forcing it. I'm like, it's not the time, because I've had ideas for so many other decks that I'm so glad I didn't write, you know? So
Yeah.
like you start to trust that you're in a conversation with the universe. And it's not like, some people are like, the universe is my piggy bank, the universe is my sugar daddy, whatever I want it gives me. And it's like, not really, because it's a lot smarter than that. Like if you got everything you ever wanted, you would have a life that you really didn't want, you know?
Yeah.
So it's like also allowing when it's saying no, and it there's that quote, it's like the universe never says no, it's not now, but I actually do think it also says no. But that, it doesn't mean not now, it means no, something better, something more aligned, and to trust that we don't have the answers to everything.
Absolutely, because and so yeah, please borrow from mine and Sahara's experiences, because I do think it helps like we both have had like, you know, multiple at this point in our careers experiences like that. So I think we have a little bit more faith than the average bear in that area, because we've also just experienced it. We've been like, oh, that totally happens. And so, you know, it's so much more important that you're like, okay, I just need to keep doing the things and it'll lock into place when it's meant to lock into place. And I don't have to stress about it. And if I'm meant to take, you know, like for with the thing, it's like if you're meant to self-publish, you can also trust that you'll know that. And if that doesn't feel good or that doesn't feel aligned, then you don't, right? But like you can kind of just trust as it's going. And I agree. I think if the universe gave us everything that we thought we wanted, we'd be so unhappy. And so it's trusting that there is this like higher divine guidance. And again, just knowing that like that one of the quotes I use a lot in my program is like, know thyself and rig thyself accordingly. And, you know, both of us are like, we're so creative and have like so many ideas and like, you know, have thought of more books or programs or things than like we could probably ever humanly launch, you know. And so knowing that that's like how we are, and there's nothing wrong with how we are is perfect, then the universe gives us like a sifter, right? To say, great, our job is not, you know, is to like honor whatever in our heart or whatever comes up creatively for us. Great. Put it out there for a little like taste test and see, you know, whatever it is. Right. And then trust that like, okay, the ideas of mine that are really meant to go through fruition come and get the wings, right? We know that we're doing our full part on it. We're not like keeping it to ourselves or like, you know, doubting our ability to create whatever it is. But yeah, I think that's just it's just so important, and trusting, you know, asking yourself like what, again, I think that's why the essence question is so important, right? Is like, what is the essence of this desire? What do I really want, right? The essence of the desire for a book is I want to share this information with the world, right? And so I was like,
and it never comes from force. Like I see people trying to force their manifestations all the time. And just that energy of trying to force something and make it happen is so repelling. Like I'm sure you've had people like reach out to you of like, promote myself. They're like following up 4 times. It's like, obviously it's not in alignment. It's not like I needed the 5th email to decide that you're like the magical person I want to collaborate with. It's just, but I think that we just have, you know, we hear things like, if the door's not opening, beat the door down and like get the door to open. And then even if that person succumbed, like let's say you try to force a relationship with someone, you try to force a business partnership, or even being on someone's podcast, the energy is not there because they didn't want it. They were not open to it. They were not receptive to it. So even if you force it, it's still not that very thing that you wanted.
Oh my God, yes. 1,000 times yes. And I, you know, I also get these emails, and sometimes it really breaks my heart. This is just a disclaimer. I hope none of you guys have fallen prey to this, but there are some coaches out there that like preach to do this, to like really like, you know, consistently email people that you want to
I block them. I'm like, this is really intrusive.
Yeah. But why it's intrusive is because it's not coming from a pure divine space, right? So if someone was coming from a pure divine space, and
half the time it doesn't even have your name, it's like the wrong name on it.
Yeah, exactly. And then you're like, okay, well, this is not the person that like meditated and got a hit and was like, oh, this would be a really good fit for Sahara because of X, Y, and Z. This is the person that again is approaching from lack and just doing all this, you know, random whatever. And what happens is it's like also not trusting, right? So like your example, which I'm sure your listeners know about how you met Deepak, is like a perfect example of this, right? It's like if you, and I've had experiences like that with Marianne Williamson would be my version of that, right? Marianne Williamson was like my version of Deepak, I guess, for you, right? Where she was like my big teacher. And I loved watching her all at Course in Miracles lectures. I've read almost all of her books. Like I'm a huge like Marianne Williamson fan. And I wanted to like meet her and give her my book and like have a relationship with her and whatnot. And also, but I knew that like, you know, trying to randomly contact Marianne Williamson was like not the way to go about it. And so I just held that desire in my heart and I allowed myself to be guided. And I watched her I supported all of the stuff that she put out in the world, because that was like me energetically investing in her and my belief in her work. And then there was an opportunity when I first moved to LA to volunteer for her for something. And I was like, great, I want to volunteer for her. And I did it even more so because I just wanted to, like, be in her world and support her. So I was like, great, what better way to support someone than to offer my time and energy into like helping them. It was like a weekend long event that I volunteered for. And sure enough, what happened? There was only like 5 or 6 of us that volunteered, and she did meditations and prayers with us every morning, and she talked to us, and like, of course we had more of a relationship because we were there to support her and help her out, right? And similarly, like now, like I went to another one of her events, and we have mutual friends, and she's, I gave her Eat with Intention, and I've gotten the privilege of asking her some pretty pivotal questions about my career and my life. And she's like, I would consider someone that like I'm genuinely connected to, right? But it wasn't because I tried to force that connection. And so much of that is also, it's when we're coming from that space of I need to get something from someone, instead of how can I support this person, right? The people that I'm closest to, like, are the people that often like always regram all of my stuff, are the people that like I don't even need to ask. Like, there are people that have posted about the book on Amazon as soon as I put up pre-orders. I didn't have to ask to do that. They just wanted to because they support me, and you best believe I know their names. And you better believe I recognize that stuff. And if the time comes down the line, and that's how we make more of those genuine connections. And so when we're genuinely manifesting and we're getting that divine action, right? That divine action, will rarely be from that place of force, right? And that's, if we're going to even get like masculine and feminine, it's like the masculine just trying to force something, right? Versus the feminine of like allowing yourself to align up with that vibrationally. That doesn't mean you don't ever do anything, right? I had to take the initiative to volunteer at that thing. I took the initiative because of my love and my feeling of connection with her to always support whatever she was doing. And I would share it on my stories and be like, hey, just watch this great lecture from Marianne or whatever, right? And that's the kind of divine action that we're given. And what happens is actually so much better. Because then whether you meet the person or you get that job interview or you get the publishing deal or whatever it is, like you were saying, now you're met on different terms, right? Now you're met as equals. Now you're met as, people that like, there's, what I mean? A vibrational alignment, which changes the whole thing. Whereas, yeah, that's just like, it is icky. It's icky energy when it comes from that way. And even if you're going to reach out to someone, thinking of it from that place of, and this is where your heart and your soul would always think of it from, right? Is like, how could I be of service to this person?
Absolutely. I so resonate with all of that. And, I think a lot of people when they feel like they're on the outside, they feel like they need to push their way in. They need to get their foot in the door. We hear all these terms. So like maybe if I keep emailing enough, they're going to notice me but again, it's not even just the emails, it's the energy of it. It's all about me. I'm so important. So you should give your time to me. And it's like, think of someone like Marianne, like she has a lot going on in her life. Like woman has run for president, and to do so much. So if you're just like, hey, I'm Cassandra and my book is so important and my book this and my book, and you should write something for my book, she could see right through that. Like this person is not showing up of service, and I'm here for bigger things than to like sit down. Can I pick your brain for a cup of coffee? Like, no, she offers, and so many of us offer so much free content that's like pick your brain on that. And now it's so interesting because now I'm in a position of hiring people. Every single person I hire now are my most enthusiastic students. Just those students who are like, they just go above and beyond, and they're there and they're leaning in, and they're like they're naturally so here for it, and they're here for the mission. Those are all of the people on my team right now, and I love it because their hearts are there. Whereas I get emails from people all the time who like just saw me on a job website and they're like, hey, I'd love to work for you because I'm this. And I'm like, I don't care what your skills are. I don't care where you went to college. I don't care anything about your credentials. I care if your heart is in alignment with the mission. And the way that I know that is, have you shown up before?
Yeah. Well, it's also, it goes to that, you know, to even like make this broader with manifesting in general, right? It's like, it's the difference between like being it, right? Like actually embodying it and being it, and taking action from that space of not being it yet, right? And so being it, and this is how I've always felt in my career, is that I just want to be so strong in what I do and the value that I provide and what I share with the world that naturally people will find me, right? And that, like I said, it doesn't mean I don't do any work. It doesn't mean I don't whatever. But overall, on the whole, right? Like even there are people that like I know, like in my kind of extended sphere, right, that I could ask to, you know, help promote me or whatnot, that I am consciously not asking because I want the alignment to be there where it feels really organic, where it's not like, oh, okay, do me this favor, da, da, da. Which like, yeah, it's fine every once in a while with your friends, you ask favors, right? But when it's someone that's like that, it's like, you know, it would be really more powerful. And I've learned this, it's so funny, just about podcast interviews too, right? I don't really pitch myself for podcast interviews, right? Like obviously I have like friends that have podcasts, you know, and that's like its own thing. But like, you know, the people that I want someone that genuinely wants to interview me, right? Because that's a whole different vibration. I get pitches all the time. And there was, you know, there was one time where I said yes to a pitch because I knew of the person and I thought it was interesting. And it taught me a huge lesson because it wasn't in alignment for me to have them on my podcast, right? And so anyway, just thinking about that in general, when it comes to manifesting and action, it's like if you start being the person that gets interviewed, start being the person that person wants to do an event with, start being the person that partner is going to want to fall in love with, right? Just start being the person yourself, then those opportunities will present themselves, right? Whereas sometimes we think that it's the external thing, and this is what it gets down to with the manifestation, right? We always think it's the external thing that's going to help us shift into the being. Oh, if Sahara interviews me for her podcast, then I will finally be the successful spiritual teacher that I want to be. That's not true. You have to, that won't happen. First of all, even if Sahara, like, you know, out of the goodness of her heart, like takes a gamble on some random person and does it, if they're not embodying it, it will do nothing.
Yeah.
It will do
nothing.
And
I've been on so many podcasts that I also carried like, oh my God, if I get on this podcast, like they have such a big audience there. So like, guess what? Freaking crickets. Nothing happens. And people think, oh, I'll become the spiritual teacher or the whatever that I want to be if I get interviewed by these places. And it's not. You actually have to be that. You have to offer that value, show up in that vibration. And it's not about how many followers you have or how many things you've been on, et cetera. It's about who you are, because I may have someone on the podcast, such as my teacher, Malika, who's like in her 60s, like literally doesn't know how to use Instagram, definitely doesn't know anything about technology. And every single time I have her on, people love it because she is just so being it. Like she is just it. And she's not doing it for any approval of anyone else. They can feel that. Whereas someone else who may just like have the perfect things to say, and it's like every response is like curated and crafted. And it's like they're, you know, someone might even tune into an episode, they can stop listening because they feel that heart is not there. So it's like, again, we can't skip those steps. Be that person that you want to show up as, and don't ever think any opportunity is going to make you successful, because it's not.
No, and it's such a good point that you said. It's true. It's like we think, and I've come across this so much in my career too, where it's like I remember I did like the not the Today Show, but like those morning shows. Like we've both done that for like book things, right? And you're like, oh, this is gonna be great. So many people are gonna go get the book, right? And then nothing. Right. And it's so we've created these, and it's so funny. And it doesn't mean like you get to do those, right? Like I have fun doing them. They're a good time, right? There's like, it's fine. But but we can't put our power outside of ourselves. And that's exactly what we do in those situations where we're like, oh, okay, I need to have X amount of Instagram followers to be successful, or I need to have, you know, this person have me on their podcast or be on this TV show or have whatever outside validation that we're calling in, right? And the truth is that that stuff is like a effect, right? It's not the cause, it's an effect. So when you have that inside of you and you start showing up as that, then all of a sudden more people will start listening. When you start showing up as that, then all of a sudden more people are going to want to talk to you, interview you, maybe more opportunities are going to come up, right? And it's like, so, you know, just, there are a lot of people that are like, oh, I want to write a book so that I can, you know, be an author or be like respected, whatever. And I'll be like, oh, well, what's your book about? And like half the time they don't even know what their book is about, right? They just like the idea of it. Or it's like, okay, my book is about this. And I'm like, great. So where are you sharing that content now? Right? Where are you establishing
people
yourself
have
now?
this fear of like, oh, well, I can't share the idea yet because it's like for the book. And it's like, if you're going to be so stingy with your ideas, you're never going to get better ones.
Oh, absolutely. And also that's like, just like from a logistical point, the complete opposite of what any publisher will ever go for. If they can't see a body of work.
Here is this never shared before idea that you're for the first time only going to share in the book, and you have no audience and you've never shared it. It's like, that's just not how it works. We have this like archaic idea and this fantasy of being chosen. Like someone's going to choose you and do all the work for you, and you get to just shine your light, and that's it. And that's just not how the world works. And God bless that, because we've seen that era of like the select few being chosen, the Michael Jacksons and Marilyn Monroes of the world. Look how both of them died, you know? So we don't want to be chosen and give up our control by others. We get to put in that action and consistently choose every single facet of what we're doing. And that also requires responsibility.
Yes, absolutely. That is, it's a responsibility of owning that, you know, you know, one of the things that I talk about in the book, and I talk about in other things as well, because I just love this example, is considering yourself like, what if you were the most influential person in the world right now? Like, what if you had a 24/7 reality show that was streaming into every home across the world and people were just like obsessed with you watching it, right? Like, what if that was reality? What messages are you sending through your daily life? Right? Through how you show up, like through how you show up with conflict, through how you show up with taking care of yourself, through how you show up with your work ethic. Like, what are you transmitting? Right? Is that a transmission that, because we are doing that, right? Maybe we don't have a reality show that's streaming, but we're always transmitting our energy and our frequency to the universe and how we show up as. So we're telling, you know, the universe what we're in alignment with and what we're willing to do and how hard we're willing to work, and the responsibility. You know, what you said about responsibility, I used to have a plaque on my desk in my old apartment that said, you know, with great power comes great responsibility. And, you know, and then I would, I had another little thing that I wrote that said, are your hands responsible enough to hold the gifts you've been given and the gifts you're asking for, right? And so I think thinking about it from that point of view, and really whatever it is that you desire, are you embodying it? And then going back to that process of being like, if you're not embodying it, it's not because there's anything wrong with you or you're a failure. It's because you have a block to embodying it. So you just need to look at it and say, okay, it's really hard for me to embody myself being a respected coach and author or whatever it is, right? Great. That's great information and awareness. So let's look at what are the blocks that are coming up around for you that, okay, well, I feel like I'm not wise enough or whatever it is. Great. Okay, good. Now we have what we can work on. Let's look at that and let's shift that. And that's from a more authentic place. That's the work you should be doing, instead of spending all your days, you know, pitching people that, you know, that you're not ready for. Right. And then there's so many stories too of Marianne Williamson. I think, is it Marianne Williamson has a good story? Yeah. Marianne Williamson has good stories about this too, about how, you know, sometimes like, we don't want an opportunity before we're ready for it. If you get on, like, for instance, Oprah used to be like the golden ticket, right? You used to get on Oprah and like you'd be a New York Times bestselling author, you'd be like solidified in the public eye. I forgot who this was. I don't know if it was Chris Carr. It was someone in the wellness world that there was a story about, that they got on Oprah, but they didn't have like their systems in place, right? Like they didn't have like a newsletter. They didn't have, like I guess their website set up or something like that, right? And so they got this great opportunity, and like it didn't hit as hard as it could have because it was a little premature. And so it's also like trusting that. It's like, just using the example of your podcast, right? For someone that was like pitching that, it's like, you might think right now, when you have no courses, no books, like you're just starting out, that like, being on a podcast like Sahara's or some other big podcast, or being in a TV show or on the news or something like that would like rocket launch you to fame. But actually, it would be way more serving of you after you've built after you have a book that people could buy, or a course that people could, you have some sort of container to hold the gifts that would bear with it. And so sometimes it's like we try to put the cart before the horse in those scenarios. And once again, if you keep tuning into you, into your own intuition, into your heart, into your divine support, you won't be led to those opportunities until it's in divine time. The guidance you will get will be like, no, work on the book. Don't spam people for a podcast. Work on your book, work on your business, like start, establishing yourself as like a leader, an expert.
I love that so much, because you could use your one shot at something, and you, not that you blew it, but it's like, could this have been better timed?
Yeah.
And it's like, instead of putting your energy external and like, I need to get the deal, I need to get the press, I need to get this, I need to get that, focus on you being the expert of whatever you want to be the expert of, the go-to of your niche, of your category, that there are already too many people around you that want to work with you, that, and so many people I see, they want to jump to do a course. They want to jump to write a book. It's like, have you even created a one-on-one transformation first? Like, get so good at creating one-on-one transformations. Like always, any coach, any author, anyone out there, absolutely, you must start with one-on-one coaching. Otherwise, how are you going to make a global shift if you can't make a personal shift? And once you have that, you've learned. For me and for you, it's years. I still work with people one-on-one when I'm working with my students. And it's so helpful because it allows me to have my feet on the ground and see what people are feeling right now. So again, don't skip those steps. Like, be the best one-on-one coach, then be the best group coach, then create the best course that you can, then create the next thing that you can. And then when it naturally feels like I've done everything I can, this feels like the next logical, expansive step, then it's the time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think you'll be guided to exactly how you're meant to, when it's coming from that genuine space, right? And all of like the podcasts, the courses, the books, the whatever it is, right? They're all manifestations of the same essence, right? The same essence of like, we want to create transformation. For me, like my thing is I want to show people a new way of living in the world, of viewing their reality and who they are in it. And so that same essence is like what I work with my one-on-one clients with, what I work with my Divine Design Your Life clients with, what I do on Instagram, what if I put up a TikTok, it's from the same place. If I'm writing a book, if I end up getting interviewed on a TV show or podcast, like it's all that same essence. And so that's the soul desire. That's the truth, right? Your soul is not attached to the vehicle, right? Your soul is attached to the essence and the truth of what it is. So do the thing that is, in front of you. And that's kind of like, I think that's a good thing to kind of like wrap with too, is like, hey, so often it's so much simpler than we make it, right? It's like, what's the next obvious step, right? Oh, well, the easiest thing would be for you, if like the easiest thing is like, I don't know, if someone out there loves TikTok, right? They're like, okay, let me just start sharing these tidbits on TikTok. Okay, that's obvious. Okay, so that's good. Oh yeah, let me put up a website and see if anybody wants like a 30-minute session about this, right? And I think sometimes it's like we're like, it's right in front of us, right? It's always that, like, the next thing's right in front of us. We don't need to try to reinvent the wheel all the time. We'll be guided to that next thing. and we can kind of flow into that alignment when we're connected to that essence, right? If we're waking up and we're like, my essence is that I want to serve the world, you know, and what do I want to do? I want to share this new way of living in the world with them. Okay, what can I do today to do it? And so some days that looks like me getting on a one-on-one with like 3 people during the day or whatever, and I'm changing their world in those sessions. And some days it looks like me getting on IG live, and some days it looks like getting on a podcast, and some days it looks like me going on a TV interview or something like that. But it's all down to that essence. And then again, you're like asking like, how can I be of service, right? And we're unlocking from like the 3D circumstances, right? Anything the 3D world says like you have to do this or you have to do that, or like this is the linear progression of it. It's like, no, actually, your job is to live your essence, and that will be revealed to you as it goes, instead of thinking, oh, well, everybody that does this, the only way I can do this is through a book, or the only way I can do this is through a podcast, or the only way I can do this is through whatever it is, right? It'll be a combination of the thing that lights you up, and that thing that is there for you. It's like, start where you are, but just start and like do it and embody it. Because if you're like, okay, right now I'm teaching yoga at the YMCA and I want to be a world-renowned spiritual teacher that's teaching women how to embody their heart's desires, right? Great. Do that in your yoga class at the YMCA every time you show up, and you like show up as that person. Great. Welcome to my yoga class. And I'm going to teach you how to embody your heart's desires through this yoga class. Great. When you show up to, a girlfriend, it's a great way to even do this too, right? A girlfriend's coming to you with a problem that she has. Great. Can you embody that wisdom with her? Can you embody that, even though this is not like a paid client and a girlfriend's coming to you, that, the universe is giving you, in A Course in Miracles, it says, when the teacher is ready, the students appear, right? And we've mistakenly thought that the only students are the ones that are paying us whatever, right? And it's true, some students will pay us, right? And then there's other students, it's just us showing up. And there's students that are going to be in the yoga class, and there's students that, you guys that are listening to Sahara's podcast are also my students in a way, because I was called to show up here, right? And we have all different varieties of students and people we're meant to learn. And it's like us just showing up in that way. And sometimes it is, my first like coaching was a lot of my close friends, and I wouldn't call it coaching, but it was me showing up when like a friend came up with me about a certain problem, being like, okay, let me talk to them from my highest self. Let me give them this wisdom that I'm wanting to share with the world, because, what a better gift than creating that kind of transformation for someone that you love and care about so much, right? And not diminishing that because it's just your girlfriend, that's important too.
So accurate. Every single interaction we have is an opportunity to embody our desires and our gifts that we want to share the world. And like, what is the world? It's a bunch of individual people. So like, we have this like egotistical way of like, I'm going to change the world, but it really begins with every single interaction. And like, if you want to help people connect to their heart or live their dharmas or whatever, are you doing that with everyone around you? Are you doing it with the people in your corporate job? Are you doing it with your family members? Like, these are all your greatest, practitioners that you get to work with right now. And I see people, they're like, well, I don't want to coach my friends. Like, I don't want to coach my family. I don't want to coach this, but it's like, that's where you get to really start. If you can't work with those people, then how are you going to work with people you actually don't even know?
Well, and it's one thing, you're going to have people that are like open to it, not open to it, right? Mm-hmm. And sometimes family members can be a little tricky if they're just like really don't want to hear it, right? But most of your friends are pretty open to it. So I feel like they're like a pretty chill place to start. And also the way I like to think about this is like, this is like OG PR, right? Like, we think of now PR as like getting on podcasts and like, sending out, Instagram stuff or whatever. But also like, this is, and there's studies. There's a book called Contagious that talks about, organic kind of like PR and whatnot. And still, mouth to mouth, or word of mouth, not mouth to mouth, word of mouth is the most powerful form of PR. Mm-hmm. So if you think about that, everyone has that power. And so, and what is that? That's like the, us showing up as ourselves. Then what happens is your girlfriend who you helped, right, in that scenario, and helped her move through something. Now, all of a sudden, she's thinking something. One of her other girlfriends has a thing, and she's like, oh my gosh, my girlfriend told me about this. You should try that. Or, hey, my girlfriend has a meditation that could really help you with this. Check her out. And then who do you know? The girlfriend's girlfriend ends up working at like Shape Magazine and is like, oh my God, can you come do like a meditation for us because of this? And that's how so many, we so much in our society that's so focused on online media, I think diminishes the power of that. And you have that opportunity, I think that's a really good authenticity and integrity test is, would your closest friends, really like, would you be the one that they ask about this stuff? Mm-hmm. Right? Are you someone that your closest friends listen to around this? Right? Like, to me, like the fact that like you were willing to like come over and do that like honey jars thing with me for your house, right? That's huge. That's showing how I'm showing up as a friend too. Right. And being like, this is not who, like, and we could say this about each other more than anything, but like, this is not just who I am, like when the cameras are rolling, like, this is like who I am, for better, for worse.
Yeah, this is like how we like hang out. We're like, okay, let's do rituals and like do the Byron Katie work. And
yeah, no, it's true. And that's what we did, like we'll go through and be like, okay, what's on your altar right now? To be like, I'm working through this. And you're like, okay, like, let's talk about like this or try this. Right. And that also just speaks so much to, again, and that you create this energy around you of like, this is who you are. This is who you are. And it's just simply who you be, right? Which is the essence of manifesting, right? Because then once you be it, whatever else like that wants to come or externally needs to come to support you or whatever, you'll be guided to do it, or it will just come, from that place of being.
So good. Well, we have explored so much. I know I'm like, yes, and this, and this, and that. So this has been so illuminating, fantastic, heart-opening, expansive, fun. I hope every listener here just felt like the third little friend, or all like sipping our little matcha lattes together, talking about life. And I think it's inspiring too, because like, even if we weren't on a podcast, this would have been our conversation.
Yeah,
like, this is actually like just how we talk.
That we have.
Yeah. And it just,
like,
I think,
break down this aspect of manifesting today. I'm like, oh, fascinating. I wanted to do that too.
Totally. We're like, I've noticed the collective is feeling like this. Like, what is your take? And I think it's really inspiring that we share that with people, because it's like, that's what friendships can look like. It doesn't have to be like, of course, talk about your life, but it doesn't have to be, let me offload and complain about everything wrong with my life. Now you offload and complain about everything wrong with your life. Then we leave the interaction both actually feeling a bit heavier. Instead, you can use a friendship as a place that you get to play with each other's highest selves and make magic and talk about these expansive ideas that are on your heart, and actually leave the conversation with more ideas for your business, for your creativity, and all of that. So I think so many of us, like, especially right now, the theme is like, I'm an introvert. I don't want to go back to normal because people are draining. It's like, well, no, it's the relationships you've established with people that are draining, but relationships can actually be the most fulfilling part of your life. But it does take one person leaning in. And sometimes you may have been like, no, I don't want to talk about this stuff. And then naturally the friendship would have faded away, but we've been friends for like over 5 years now, because we continue to be on the same page, and we talk about our stuff, but also we talk about things that inspire each other. And that's what always makes the conversation feel fun and enjoyable.
And I think that's also like, even when you're talking about your stuff, it's just a different energy, right? Like, I actually had a friendship years ago that broke away because she would come to me with stuff, and she was struggling with some financial stuff at the time. And so she would come to me and I'd be like, okay, like, and I think of like 7 different like creative solutions and be like, we could try this, we could try that. And like, let's do this practical thing while we work on the energetics of it. And like, you know, and she couldn't handle it. And she literally was like, I just want someone, she literally told me, like, I just want someone that would feel sorry for me. Right. And I was like, well, I don't feel sorry for you because it's completely under control and we can fix it. So let's just fix it. That's like the kind of, you know, and so, and that friendship just ended and it's fine, you know, but again, like we both appreciate friendships where it's like, if there are sometimes where I'm just gonna, you know, we could bring something to each other and just be like, this is what I'm working through, because we're also just the kind of people that if something's on our altar, we're already working on it, right? We're not just like languishing in it or being like, oh no, we're like, okay, this is what I've thrown at it so far. I've done this meditation and I've done this ritual and I've journaled about this. Do you have any other thoughts? Right? And so that even of it itself is like a completely different energy in a friendship, because you can hold the space for if someone's going through, you know, because gosh, we're all growing and constantly moving through other things, but you hold it from this creative space of like, and we're divine creators and anything is possible. And so therefore, let's just find the possibility here. Let's find how we transcend this, which I think is so important to, you know, your whole, you know, how you manifest your life, right? Is being able to not only do that with yourself first and foremost, of course, but then also, like I said, with a few of the other things with like your divine truth, you know, serum or something like that in the book. It's like having those closest, nearest, and dearest to you also holding that space for you, right? So that if I call up Sahara and I'm like, I'm overwhelmed right now and I have too much on my plate, she can be like, well, remember when you said that thing about like, actually you're just expanding to hold that and like you're creating this next level. And I can be like, oh, that's right. You're right. That's true. That's what it is. And you're like, and Sarah could be like, okay, well, what do you feel like, what belief do you need to release, or what do you feel like needs to shift for you to really feel like you're embodying? And those are the kinds of conversations we have where it's like we're working through it. And so, and that again, that comes from you showing up as that person first and you being able to be like, I'm going to be this kind of person. If you don't like hanging out with people, it's probably because you, like you said, you don't like the kind of conversations or the energy. So be the person. Like people laugh at me sometimes when I hang out with new people. I will literally be like, what is like on your heart right now? Or what's setting your soul on fire? Like
they're like they're always like, you ask the most interesting questions. I'm like, how else do people hang out? Like,
yeah. And some people laugh at it and I'm like, no, but this is like what I care about. Like, I want to know, like, what are you manifesting right now? Like, what's going on in your heart? Like, what are you working through? Otherwise, like if we're going to talk about like random stuff, or you're just going to complain to me about whatever's going on, like I'm like, oh yeah, I'd rather just be alone with myself.
100%. I think a lot of people who are labeling themselves as introverts just aren't in the right types of friendships and not showing up in the way that they want to, and the same way that the energy is when they're by themselves. Maybe when they're by themselves, they're journaling and they're meditating and they're working with their crystals and their oracle cards, but they feel like they can't be that version of themselves with the people around them. Well, that's an invitation to upgrade and shift the people around you so you can pull cards together and like, hey, let's take 10 minutes to journal. And like, I mean, we literally did a journal practice every day.
Yep. And we did breath work and we exercised.
Yeah.
And because, and that's exactly true. Like I have always identified as more of an introvert, but the truth is that like, I don't like large meaningless gatherings.
Yeah.
Right. That's more of the truth of it. Whereas like, yeah. And like, you know, me and Sahara, we're more apt, you know, depending on the day, depending on the mood. But like, I would say for the most part, we're more apt to be like, yeah, let's like do a ritual and like, let's meditate, or like, you know, let's do, you know, some like creative thing for this or whatnot. And other people might be a little bit more like, oh no, like I need to like go to like a bar or a club or, you know, out, do whatever. So it's just about finding those practices that light you up and the things that you enjoy. You know, like Sarah also loves like dancing and doing that. And that's like another aspect, but it's like just honoring that. You don't have to do a thing if it doesn't resonate with you to go to a big house party or whatever. And maybe it's just not your vibe, but you could like have like a few girlfriends over for like tea and journaling and meditation. And that's your vibe for a Friday night. I think that's what we really crave more than anything. It's just finding that, that connection.
So good. Well, thank you so much for sharing so much juicy, potent wisdom with us today, for opening our minds to such a great conversation, especially for people who seek to be entrepreneurs in any way. Like, I feel like every single entrepreneur should be like mandatory listening this episode because it's like so many of just the limiting beliefs and the blocks and the forgetting. And that's just what I see again and again and again. So this is an episode to re-listen to, guys. There's literally was so much in there shared. And lucky for us, you've written a book of over 100 different manifesting with meditation practices. So can you share with us where we can get this book and connect with you further?
Yay. So you can get Manifesting Through Meditation wherever books are sold. Amazon is obviously a super easy one. You can go to CassandraBodzak.com/manifesting and it will show you all the book bonuses. I have some free guided meditations, an extended version of part 1 where I dive even deeper into like all the manifesting process that we talked about here. And so you can get all of that, and you can also grab the book there at CassandraBodzak.manifesting. And there is manifesting, just so you know, there's meditation specifically for career in here. There's manifestation specifically for romantic relationships in here. Also specifically for calling in your tribe in here, specifically for connecting to your purpose and the impact and whittling down to the divine essence. So many of the things that we talked about, I really wanted to make this like go-to manual for you to really like uncover all of this. And then you can always find me at Cassandra Bodzak on, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, all the places.
Yay. Well, thank you again for sharing with us today.
Yay. Thank you for having me, love. Parvati Pati Maha